In the village of Umudara, nobody stayed awake past midnight. Not because of thieves, not because of wild animals, but because every night at exactly 12 o'clock, a woman would knock on one door, and before sunrise, someone would disappear. People said if you heard the knock, you must never answer, never speak, never even breathe loudly. But one night, I heard it myself. My name is Chike, and I was 16 when my mother sent me to stay with my grandmother in Umudara during the rainy season. I grew up in the city where ghost stories were jokes told during power outage. So when I arrived and everyone warned me about the woman of midnight, I laughed. My grandmother did not laugh. The first night, she bolted every window before sunset. She spread ash across the doorway and tied a red cloth around my wrist. "Do not remove it," she said. "Grandma, are we fighting witches or mosquitoes?" I joked. She stared at me so long, I stopped smiling. At midnight, she whispered, "If you hear knocking, do not answer. If she calls your name, do not respond. If she sounds like me, do not move."
I wanted to ask more, but she had already blown out the lamp. That night, the village became too quiet. No dogs barked, no insects sang. Even the wind seemed afraid. Then the church bell in the distance rang 12 times. By the 12th strike, my throat had gone dry. Then it came. 3 slow taps on the door somewhere outside. Another house. Closer. I sat upright on the mat. My grandmother gripped my arm so hard, her nails dug into my skin. The knocking moved from house to house like someone walking down the road. Then it stopped directly at our door. I held my breath. Then a soft voice came from outside. "Mama, open for me." It was the voice of my aunt Ngozi, who lived in Enugu. My grandmother's hand trembled. Again, the voice spoke. "Mama, I'm cold." I nearly stood up. It sounded exactly like her. Then my grandmother leaned to my ear and whispered, "Ngozi died 2 years ago." My blood froze. The knocking returned, louder now. The wooden door shook in its frame. Then, suddenly, it stopped. No footsteps, no sound. Nothing. At dawn, villagers gathered in the square. Old Pa Okeke was missing. His door was wide open. Inside, they found wet footprints leading to his bed, but none leading out. I told myself someone had kidnapped him. I told myself footprints could be faked.
I told myself many things, but the next night, before sunset, every family locked themselves inside again. I wanted to leave the village, but rain had flooded the only road out. So I stayed. That evening, I asked my grandmother who the woman was. She stared into the fire before answering. "Long ago," she said, "there was a widow named Wanyocha. Beautiful, quiet. She sold herbs and helped women give birth. But when children began dying of fever, people blamed her." What happened? They dragged her from her hut at midnight, beat her, called her witch, buried her alive outside the village. My stomach turned. She screamed one curse before the soil covered her mouth, Grandma said. "Every midnight I will return, and each time I knock, one of you will follow me into the ground." I wanted to say curses aren't real, but I remembered the voice outside our door. That second night, I decided to watch from the window. My grandmother begged me not to. I waited until the bell struck 12. Then I lifted the curtain a little. At first, I saw nothing. Then, a figure at the far end of the road. Tall, wrapped in black cloth, soaked dark at the hem. She did not walk. She glided. My heart pounded so loud, I feared she would hear it. Her head was bent unnaturally to one side. Her hair covered her face. In one hand, she carried something long. As she came closer, moonlight touched it. It was a wooden pestle, stained black. She stopped at each house and knocked 3 times. Nobody answered. Then she reached our gate. Slowly, she turned her head toward my window. I dropped the curtain. My grandmother whispered, "Did she see you?" Before I could answer, not at the door, at the window beside my face. I screamed. My grandmother threw ash at the wall and began praying. The knocking moved to the door. Then a voice came. "Chike." It was my mother's voice. "Open the door, my son." Tears rushed to my eyes before sense returned. My mother was in Lagos. "Chike," the voice pleaded. "Please." I stepped forward without thinking. My grandmother slapped me so hard, stars burst in my vision. "That is not your mother." The voice outside changed instantly. From sweet to deep, to many voices speaking together. "Open." The room grew cold. Then came scratching under the door. Something was trying to crawl in. My grandmother poured palm oil across the threshold and shouted words I didn't understand. A shriek exploded outside, so sharp the roof rattled. Then silence. At dawn, we opened the door. Across the oil were handprints. Not human handprints. Too long, too many fingers. I no longer laughed at village stories. On the 3rd day, elders met beneath the Iroko tree. They said the woman had taken 3 people in 1 week, more than ever before.